So that's the horizontal component. The vertical component will ask for next. This is one of the few places where we will right-click in the middle of a command. We'll go ahead and use our active profile. If I wanted to select the profile, I can do that as well. But I'll go and just right-click. The corridor will take the name from the alignment in this instance. So it's going to call it int A northwest. I'm usually good with that. The caveat for that would be if I'm creating multiple corridors for something. Yes?
Do we want the other profile though?
What profile is showing doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So this is actually my northeast profile. I'm not going to interact with this unless I wanted to select a profile element explicitly, in which case I would need that one open. But yeah, so right now we're just showing that. The profile still exists on this other one, and I know that because if I actually hover over it, it'll tell me that it has an active profile. Okay. So I'm going to be happy with the corridor name unless I'm doing typically a roadway corridor over. I've gotten a little bit more liberal in my lengths. Certainly comfortable with the 2 mile corridor, probably even pushing 3 anymore, especially as the software's become more stable. Anyway, I'm going to go left click, accept the name if I wanted something different. At this point, the create corridor command is complete. The corridor is a container. It's a container that holds templates and template drops. Since an empty corridor is not of much use to us, the software does automatically roll into the create template drop command. If you accidentally get out, once the corridor is created, we can create new template drops either out of the ribbon here or off of the context toolbar. Now, we'll go and select our templates. To interact with the template library, we're going to use a shortcut that will pop up a number of times in ORD. It's the Alt key and the down arrow simultaneously. So if I hit Alt down arrow, it'll actually bring up a picker dialog box. I don't know if that's a real term, but that's what I call it, where we can actually go through and find that. And if you were smart enough to copy yours, you'll have 2 of these. Otherwise, it'll just be whatever we've renamed that to. In this case, int A is what mine is. I'll get the preview there on the right. You can click OK on that. Always important to remember to look at what the software is asking for. I've selected that. If I don't like it, I can change that. It is going to wait for another input before it accepts that from me. And that's going to be my left click here. Whoops. There I so what is doing following that guy? Okay, so there's my int A. I'm going to go left click for that. That was odd that it jumped over to that other one. From here, we're going to have the opportunity to select a location. We'll see that. Since I am going start to end, I'm going to use that shortcut. I'll leverage this as often as I can. So I'm going to hit Alt. It's going to find the start. I'll left click to accept that. I'm going to hit Alt and it'll find the end. Left click to accept. The spacing as I go around my alignment here is going to be defined by the drop interval. When I do midline modeling, I typically do 10 feet. When I do my intersections, I bring that down usually to about 5. Didn't mention it, but one important thing about the modeling paradigm that we're moving into that we always want to be aware of is we need to remain conscious of our deliverables, okay? What am I generating this for? Am I generating this for a pretty picture? Am I generating this because I'm going to turn this over, model as the legal deliverable? Am I generating this because I'm just bored on a Friday afternoon? Depending on what it is, this may change. If I am generating some automated machine grading, or even we're starting to do automated curve content, right? I may want to bring this down. The interval drop interval here, if you're not familiar with it, I want to be the tightest that I will ever want to see that. We do have the opportunity to adjust this and expand it if I need to, okay? In this case, I'm going to go to a 5. So we'll go and accept that, and the software is going to go and generate a corridor for me. I'm not saying this is a perfect intersection model just yet, but it modeled something. Real quick, again, for those of you a little bit newer, we do get some graphics drawn here. We do see graphics mimicking what we saw on our main line and our access road. So I do have an edge of pavement line and all of my curb content. There's some sidewalk, got a hinge, I'm doing some type. back down to my existing ground back there. In addition to that, I'm going to notice I have some of these yellow handles. These yellow handles are the way we interact with the corridor. So this is the corridor object itself. So if we select that, we'll see the corridor. Corridors, like just about everything in ORD, do have a feature definition. The feature definition does impact the behavior of the corridor, most notably with a process called a multiplier. So the precision here is going to be based not only on that interval, but the multiplier here. If I go to the final here, and this is just in my properties dialog box under the feature. If I go to the final here and I watch my model, I'm going to notice that I get an extra template drop in there. It's because that design, it has a multiplier, so rather than placing every 5, it's actually doing every 5 times 2, so every 10 feet. So just something to be aware of with the corridor there, and we interact with that with these handles. The magenta dashed line there is the template drop. So again, the corridor is a container for template drops. The template drops will reside in there. This is where I will interact with the template drops. If I decided I wanted that to be a little bit finer, I can actually change that template drop here, go down to a 2 foot, 1 foot. I saw somebody model it a 1/2 a foot. Do whatever you think is appropriate. 1/2 a foot was a little bit tight for me, but we'll see that in there available. The other thing that we can do here, if I grab the wrong template, I can change that. If I wanted a different template, I can actually swap that out here on the fly. This template may not be super applicable for this purpose, but we can change those again after that. So again, building relationships, a lot of control after the fact. We're going to see that throughout our environment. Okay, time to do a little bit more cleanup here. One of the primary reasons I really like this environment is things like curves, horizontally and vertically, on my design environment here, right? The couple of the other methods that I talked about have a hard time with these. In this case, what we're going to do is we're actually going to leverage the exact geometry that's being defined to define the edge of my pavement. So I'm actually going to go out and find directly that center line. I'm going to find an edge of pavement, and what I'm going to do, using a tool called a point control, is I'm just going to stretch this pavement to go find those. Point controls are available on the Edit panel of the Corridors tab under the Edits dropdown. It's down at the bottom here called Point Control. It is very similar to the secondary alignment icon, so make sure you're getting the one with the points, not the one with the arrows. It's also available, as you might expect, on a context toolbar. In this case, it's under the Corridor Creation Tools, or what we affectionately call the hammer. So the hammer is here, fourth from the bottom in the drop down here, we will see the Create Point Control. We're going to take that. Point controls are typically put in for a time, a distance, so a location. So we'll select the start and the end. Couple things with this, reasons we're going to do this. Not necessarily applicable to our intersections, but on larger corridors. By limiting this to exactly where I want that point control to exist and where the geometry I'm going to leverage, we actually save some computing resources. So it's just going to process a little bit faster. The other thing is it actually gives me the opportunity to use the same point with different point controls and not worry about which one it's going to grab. So if I'm doing 4 miles of road and I have right turn lanes at every intersection, I can use a point control for them. And since the distance doesn't overlap, it just keeps it all a little bit cleaner with it. Anyway, we're going to go and start locking to the beginning here. So I'm going to use that Alt toggle I keep mentioning and lock to the start. When I do that, the key is that it shows that lock there and then it grays out the parameters. So that's how you know, and then the unlock will follow the cursor. So I'm going to lock to the start. I'm going to lock to the end for both of those. Oh no, not the end. Hold on. Got to do what I'm doing. Okay, for the end of this, so I'm going to put in 2 point controls. The other thing about this workflow that's great is, in this case, I'm going to go treat my main line as main line. But if I had equal arterial roads coming in here and I needed to warp everything here, instead of targeting the edge of pavement like I'm about to, I can target that center line. So I get a lot of flexibility in there that to start to move that pavement around. I can actually drop some of that crowning out and create a much more ride-friendly design. In this case, for my first point control, I'm going to go ahead and follow the outside edge of pavement for my urban road westbound. And I'm going to do that right until the point where it intersects my alignment here. This does require that my alignment reflects the side slope of my road, which we should be doing anyway. That's just that recommendation, a la Steve. I'm going to go ahead and use my intersection snap here, and just for my endpoint, just make sure that I'm tentative snapping to make sure I get that edge of pavement and that center line. The point description here is how this is going to show up in the corridor properties. So this is for my use, so whatever is useful for you in naming this. I like to call out two things. I call out the point that I'm moving. In this case, I'm going to move the center line points, and then I like to call out what I'm moving it to. So in this case, this is going to be center line, and I do underscores. I just got on the back end of the Unix DOS world where spaces weren't good, so I do underscores. So I'm going to do an underscore, and then this is going to be urban road westbound. I'll use an abbreviation, dash, and I'm targeting the edge of pavement, EOP. So I just know when I'm looking at this exactly what I'm working with for that. There's nothing magical about this. This is just for my reference. Locate point. So point control, if you're not familiar with it, takes a point in a template and controls it. I can do that horizontally, I can do that vertically, or I can do both. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to tell the software to take a point and move it. Now I get a lot of options here in generating this. If the point that I'm working with is displayed in the plan view, I can select it there. If my 3D view is open, I can select it there. If I actually have a cross-section view open, I can select it there. So I can select it anywhere where it happens to come through there. I like working out of the 3D, and primarily I like that because I just want to make sure that I'm getting the point that I expect, right? So we come all the way to the top, hover over it, make sure it says center line there, and that's the point. You can also select this out of the Create Points Tool Settings dialog box. But I don't like dialog boxes, and I don't like scrolling through long lists. So I'm going to come to my design anytime I can. Okay. From there, we're going to select the mode. Again, a fully constrained point in a template is defined horizontally and vertically. In this case, this point is defined horizontally by a distance and vertically by a slope along that distance. If I select horizontal, it will maintain that slope and follow that on out. This behavior will often use for a turn lane. Or something like this. Vertically, in this case, it would move that up and down, but keep it at that 12 foot. Or if I use both, it's going to take that point and follow whatever I tell it to exactly. Okay? So I'm going to go and select both. Control types. We can do linear geometry here. I think corridor and feature definition. I always do linear geometry. I'm not exactly sure of the purpose of the corridor feature. The feature definition will actually allow me to use references, which we'll look at a little bit, corridor references and attached content. In this case, we're just going to stick with the linear geometry. So I'm going to left click to accept that. It's going to ask for the element, so it's going to be my profile element, or plan element here. That's my edge of pavement. And then priorities, I can't have multiple point controls controlling a single point. Again, I try and limit the location, the geographic location of my point control so I don't have to worry about priorities. If you ever get behavior that you're not expecting, check your priorities. Finally, I can take a point control and I can follow it exactly, or I can do some offset. In this case, we want to hit edge of pavement, we want to hit center line. This is useful a lot of times if we're trying to use a point control and target a right-of-way, but I want to be 5 feet inside. Rather than having to offset that right-of-way, I just say, hey, come in 5 feet, and I can come inside of that. In our case, we're going to do a start and stop horizontal, start and stop vertical, all at 0, which should be set. So you should be able to left-click 4 times through that real fast. I'm going to go ahead and get out of the command and just take a quick look at what happened here. Come over into my 3D model, and just for a little bit of clarity, I'm going to shut off some of the corridor access road TCs. Shut some of these off here. So you can see a little bit what's going on here. So what I've done is I've taken that center line point that I had there and I've moved it out to follow edge of pavement. Pretty straightforward. Couple quick notes. I mentioned that the behavior of the corridor is dependent upon the feature definition. So in this case, I'm set to a final. The feature definition content for corridors, I'm just going to go look at this real quick. You don't need to follow along. Just go show you real quick what this is doing. Sets a couple of things. Included in there is the use of cardinal points, horizontally, vertically, as well as external control points. In this case, my design effort is set to false. So if I actually take my corridor and set it back to, come on, properties isn't wanting to keep up with me, and set it back to that design, what I'm going to see is I'm not going to get a point right at that location. Okay? So one of the things we do need to be aware of with our corridors is the feature definition that I'm applying. In this case, the final feature definition has that same external control point set to true. And since I applied a point control that ended here, it gave me a point at that location. Okay? Now, I'm to the point, I'm starting to just set this true to all of mine. My hardware can keep up. I'm not worried about processing a couple extra points anymore. But if your configuration does do a design in a preliminary, it is helpful to put in a key station to make sure that you're processing a point directly at this location. Okay? So let's just take a quick look at that. Does that make sense?